All right, I got a couple of stories for you, and this is about DOT scales and bad DOT cops and good DOT cops. All right, so hey, be right back.
Breaker, this is the truck and tanker yanker. I'm 10-8 with my 10 in the wind. My heaters are glowing, my manners are showing. Wind her up, let her go, come on. I'm your travel agent with a story to tell. Let's go for a ride.
Hey, it's Truck and Tank Yanker, and I'm back. And I just wanted to tell you a couple of stories about what it's like to go through a DOT scale. Now, in the last 35, coming on to 36 years, I've been through DOT inspections and through many scales all over the country, and I've had good experiences and I've had bad experiences. And I probably, if I just told you about all my bad experiences, it'd be too long a video, most likely, be my guess. But I'm going to do the best I can to tell you a couple of different things. It was in the mid-90s. It was about 1995, and I was driving a cab over Freightliner that I owned at the time, and I was in Mayfield, Idaho. They had just built a superport not long before that. And it was what we called a superport because it was a chicken coop before, and then they built barns and they built a big old fancy office and put all new scales in. And I think they could. Been a while since I've been through that way, so I can't remember if you could weigh on both sides of the building or not. But I remember at the time I was at, they only weighed on one side, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, I was there at nighttime. It was dark. I don't know what time it was, and there, and literally, I don't know, some of you fellas probably can remember or been through there recently. The ramp when you leave the interstate to get to the scale seems like it's almost a mile long. And anyway, so I was headed eastbound, and and the scale was open, so I had to go into the scale. But the traffic, and I'm like I just said, it was that ramp's like almost a mile long. The line of trucks was backed up clear to the interstate. Well, there's sort of an unwritten rule that I've followed, and I have never gotten in trouble for it. And that is, if the traffic is backed up all the way to the interstate and you have to be on the shoulder of the interstate in order to stop at the scale, you just keep on going. And because that scale is closed. Because you're just going to be a road hazard out on the interstate. Like I say, I don't know of a rule written like that, but I've rarely had the chance to do it, and I almost had the chance to do it in this particular situation. But in this particular situation, I could fit on the ramp, and it just was going to be a long wait before I got to the scale. And everybody just crawling along, like I say, nearly a mile. Well, anyway, so I'm doing business on the phone, whatever it was. It's like back in those days, I had a bag phone. It was I got the very first digital bag phone on the West Coast, and and I know like an iPhone, whatever it is now, is like over $1,000 or well over $1,000. But $600 for a phone back in the mid '90s was a lot of money, and people thought I was crazy for spending that much money on a phone. But I needed a phone with the most power that was going to get out, so I could do business, because the cellular network wasn't very good at that time. So anyway, here I am talking on the phone, and it's nighttime, like I said. And back in those days, there were no such thing as daytime running lights. And so if you had your headlights on when you're coming through a scale, you're liable to get into trouble, because it looks like you're trying to hide something by shining lights in a guy's face or something like that. I don't know. One guy over another. It's just best turn your lights off. Well, because I spent so much time getting from the interstate to the scale, crawling the whole way, and I was on the phone, dealing with business. Wasn't illegal talking on the phone when you were driving back in those days, and I was doing business on the phone, whoever it was, the whole time. I got up to the scale, so I hung up, because it's still not even back in those days, you didn't talk on the phone when you're going across the scale. You didn't look like you're doing anything other than just paying attention to the guy in the scale, because if he gets the impression you're not paying attention, he'll turn the red light on just to see if you're paying attention. All right. So anyway, that's what I did. So I left my headlights on accidentally because I was sidetracked and it took so long to get there and it was dark. And so he axled me out, which he hadn't been axling everybody else out, but he axled me out, which basically means to stop every axle group on the scale. So steer axle, drive axles, first trailer axle, con gear axle, last trailer axle. Anyway, so that's what he did. He axled me out and then blinked a red light. He just goes flash, 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 and that means come in. So I pulled off to one side, and you might as well grab everything. You grab your logbook, you grab your trailer registrations, and trailer registrations are usually kept on the trailers because like the company I was leased to at that time, we pulled multiple trailers. I mean, there was one thing that I did for this company for about a year. I handled 16 trailers every night. So you don't have the same trailers all the time. And anyway, so I grabbed my trailer registrations, my truck registration in the side pocket. I grabbed my logbook. I grab all the pile of stuff, and I go into the shack. Now, I don't want to be disparaging, but the guy had a little man syndrome, I think, and he wasn't very tall, but he walked like he was 6'5", and he was Big John or something. Anyway, I came in there and I laid my book on the counter. I opened it up. I turned it around to face him. I always have this little professional thing that I do that just makes me look like a professional. Anyway, and the first thing he said to me is he looks right at me and he's like, "You speak English?" I mean, he just ornery guy. Just like, "You speak English?" And I said, "Fair to passing." And he's like squinting at me like this, and he starts talking about all the people that was leased to my company that, or drivers or whatever, that the company I was leased to that he'd run into that don't speak English. And he's like, "How do they even get a driver's license if they can't speak English?" And he's just grousing about all these people that don't speak English, and he's going on, and he's flipping the pages in my logbook, just flipping the pages like this, flipping the pages. And finally he stops and he looks at my signature. Now my signature, I've been signing freight bills for 35 years, and it used to be I had a job where I signed my name, Dennis Edward McLean, all nice, out full long, it takes a long time, but I was signing freight bills all night long. In one job I had, my signature got quicker and quicker and quicker, and now it just looks like a whoosh, like that, and it's about that fast to do. So anyway, whoosh, that's my signature. Anyway, he finally stopped, and in our logbook, you have to certify your log with the signature, and you have to put signature on there. So anyway, he stops, and he finally says, "What does that say?" And he's pointing at my signature. And I says, "Well, it says Dennis Edward McLean." And he goes, "I can't read that." And I said, "Well, it does say signature. It doesn't say print legibly." And he just got in my grill like this, and he's squinting at me like, "You being smart with me, boy?" Like that. And I'm just smiling at him. Anyway, he finally let me go, but man alive, when he was bragging about how he used to be with the federal DOT, I kept my mouth shut because my question with him, because he's just now Idaho DOT, and I was wanted to ask him how he lost his job with the federal DOT, bad attitude or what. But anyway, that was just one of them guys that just stick under your skin for years and years, and he was one. And then it wasn't too long ago, sometime in the last 10 years or so. I guess that ain't too long, depending on how old you are. I guess if you're 20, it seems like a long time ago. It's half your life. But anyway, it was about 10 years ago or so. I was in Rocker, Montana. That scale's closed now, which is chicken coop. Chicken coop being a very small shack, and we just call them chicken coops because they're hardly bigger than a chicken coop. And they're just small shack. And this old boy, I know what the deal was. I was pulling my propane trailer. Now I have a 4-axle propane trailer. It's 53 foot 4-axle propane trailer, and I got a 4-axle tractor. And I had 2 drop axles on my trailer, so I can lift my 2 drop axles in the air when I'm empty, and just leave the fixed axles on the ground, so that it saves on tire wear. Well, I was empty. I was coming back from Idaho, and I had to go through that Rocker scale. So I took the empty bypass lane. It says empty truck bypass lane. I took the empty truck bypass lane, and he turned the red light on and blinked it furiously at me. So I pulled in, grabbed all my paperwork. I pulled in, and he says, "What are you doing trying to run my scale?" And I said, "I wasn't running your scale. I was taking the empty truck bypass lane. I'm empty." And he goes, "How do I know you're empty?" Boy, the days are long gone where I used to be scared of DOT guys that could tell I was heavy when I was driving by the other side on the interstate. They could look over and just see how your tires were bellied out to know how heavy you were. And I just looked at him because it's like, I wasn't going to inform this guy how to do his job. And I said, it said empty truck bypass lane. I'm an empty truck. "Well, I don't know that you're empty." And I said, "I am." And he's like, "Let me see your logbook." Well, that was when we were among the earlier companies that had gotten electronic logs. And so I had electronic log, and they had all sorts of, well, you can have the guy come jump up. We couldn't remove them. Like this one here is removable now, so I can take my logbook out and stick it back in its holder, and I can haul it. So I can hand it to the guy. I can haul it out of the holder. I can do whatever I want to with it. So, but the thing is, we couldn't take it out of the holder back then. And so the guy would have to get up on the running board and look at the logbook, or he could look at it on the internet, or the third option was that it could be faxed to him. My logs could be faxed to him. So anyway, he says, "I want to see your logbook right here." And I said, "Well, I got an electronic logbook. You can go out and stand on my running board and look at my logbook if you want." And he goes, "No." He says, "I want your logbook, and I want it right here." And he smacked the desk in front of him, just being all ornery. And he was just doing this like he could tweak me. And I said, "It wouldn't take much. You could just go out there and look at it." And he goes, "The law says you have to present it in front of me." And he was just matter of fact like this, kind of being a jerk. And I said, "You can look it up on the internet and look at it." And he smacked the table in front of me, and he says, "The law says you have to produce it in front of me." So I said, "All right." So I called my boss and my dispatcher at the time, and I'm standing there looking at this guy talking on my phone. And so I'm looking directly into this DOT guy's eyes as I'm talking to my boss. And I said, "I'm getting DOT inspection right now, and he wants me to produce my logbook right here." And I smacked the desk in front of me, directly in front of this guy. That's where he wants my logs. And my boss, Darren, at the time, said, he goes, "Well, he can go out there and look at it in a truck." And I says, "He wants it right smack." And I smacked the table again, right here. And he goes, "Well, he can look at it on the internet." And I said, "He wants it right smack here." And he goes, "Would he take it if I faxed it to him?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "Would you take it?" He says, "Let me talk to the guy." And my boss, Darren, said, "Let me talk to the guy." And I said, "You call him on his phone. I'm not letting him talk on my phone." And I said, "What's your phone number?" And he gave me the phone number, and I told Darren. So anyway, I hung up from Darren. That guy's phone rang. That guy picked up his phone, and he starts talking to Darren. Anyway, basically told Darren the same thing he told me. And Darren's going round and round with him. And anyway, so he hung up with Darren, and Darren called me back, and he says, "That guy is a jerk, isn't he?" And I go, "Uh-huh." Anyway, that guy's still standing there looking at me. And he goes, "Well, I'm going to fax him over." He said he would take him off the fax machine. And so anyway, he faxed my logs over, and the guy looked my logs over and then said I was good to go. But, that was just, some of them guys can just play games because they're on a pirate trip. They can tell people what to do. And it's just like, I tell you what, seems like a lot of life is like that. Politics, for sure. It's like, you can take the kid out of the sandbox, but you can't take the sandbox out of the kid. And it's like the kids that are always trying to control the sandbox and all the trucks and dolls and whatever crap's in the sandbox are always trying to control everybody and set the tone for the whole thing. And this is the game we're going to play, and this is what we're going to do. Nothing changes. They do that all the way up to the day they die. All you got to do is look at Congress and the Senate of the United States to know that for a fact. They're constantly trying to manipulate people in one way or another. It's just exercise of power. All right, that's my little high horse, and that bothers me. All right, and I don't care what party you're part of. They're all part of something that doesn't work. I'm just saying. So that's the way some of these DOT guys are. But let me finish this story with the other side of the DOT cops. And this is just a couple stories. I mean, let me tell you about a different one instead. Before I tell you the good story, let me tell you about a guy. And some of you may have heard of this guy because he was infamous in the 80s and probably the 70s, 80s, and last I heard of him was in the early 90s. And Laurel, Montana used to have chicken coops. Now they're super ports on both sides with barns and all that kind of stuff. But it used to be chicken coops back in the day. And it was sometime around 1990, I guess it was. My brother and I were running team. And my brother could be belligerent, all right? He could get mighty ornery, and anybody that knows my brother knew that. And I had told, we run team together, and I told my brother, and back in those days, if you got a ticket or something like that, and you could not pay your ticket on the spot because there wasn't no CDLs or anything like that, if you couldn't pay your ticket, you went to jail until you could pay your ticket. All right, that's just the way it was because they didn't want you to escape their state and then not pay the ticket. So, anyway, I was the keeper of the money in the truck. Basically, just meant I had to do all the paperwork, and we run on cash. Our boss gave us $1,000 cash every week, and so and with $1,000 cash, I bought fuel and incidentals and. You know, wintertime it'd be additives and different things like that, brake unfreezer and all that kind of stuff. So whatever it took to operate the truck for the week, I had $1,000 to do it. Now it would take a lot more than that, I'm just saying. Now it'd be get you about 2 fuelings and that's it. Anyway, so I told my brother, and I said, just so we're on the same page and we know, you know, everybody knows what's going on. I said, you get your big mouth into trouble. And I said, then this becomes a solo operation while you cool your heels in somebody's jail. You know, if you go and mouth off to a cop or something like that. And he's like, oh, he's over there. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And I said, all right, just so that we know we're on the same page, you know. And so anyway, it was in the middle of the night, and my brother woke me up, and my brother's shaking like a leaf. He's a big guy, and he was shaking like a leaf. And my brother's a big guy. I mean, tall and big. And he said, I'm like, what? And he said, there's a big fat guy in there, and he's calling me names. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, I said, where are we? He goes, we're in Laurel, Montana. And he says, I'm at the scale. He says, and there's a great big fat guy, DOT cop in there that's calling me names. And I go, what does he want? And he goes, he wants $20 for a trip permit. I'm like, $20 for a trip permit? And then he'll let you go? He said, yeah. I says, give him the $20, you know, because the envelope that we kept money in was, you know, so that everybody could get to it. Anyway, I was like, give it to him. Let's get out of here. Don't chat with him. And so anyway, we got our trip permit. Well, Gerke was the name of that DOT cop, and like I said, anybody in Montana knows the name of Gerke, and I know some people today that went to school with his daughter and stuff like that. But at that time, we didn't know anybody in this area, and anyway, so it wasn't that long because we crossed Montana twice a week back in those days. We was going from Seattle to Columbus, Ohio, and on a regular route. So I was going east, went through Laurel, Montana, going west, went through Laurel, Montana. But he was only on the eastbound side back in those days anyway, at least when I ever saw him. So the next time I was through there, well, my boss ran things a little closer to the edge than what he ought to have done in terms of things didn't necessarily make sense, or I think he bought all of his permits and things like that. They just weren't all in the right names and they're signed to the right stuff, you know. I'm just saying. Well, anyway, so I was driving and I went through the scale and I got stopped, and it was that big fat guy on the stool again. And I'd heard people call him Jabba the Hutt, not to his face, but when I saw him, I realized why they called him Jabba the Hutt. Easily the largest man I ever seen. I don't know how tall he was. He was sitting on a stool, but I'm telling you what, he looked like a mushroom on a stool. It looked like a toadstool. All you saw was a stool, and then he draped over, hanging off all edges. And it started from his bald head. His head was bald, and it just went out from there, just like that. Bald head. It just looked like a mushroom with a stem oozing over the edges. Easily the biggest man I ever saw face to face. All right. Now I seen pictures of bigger ones, but that was a big guy. Anyway, and when he talks, he looks like it, and everything joggled around like that. Anyway, he wanted to see my permit book, so I laid my permit book down like this and faced it to him, and he started ripping pages out of my permit book and throwing them in my face. And he goes, "You don't even belong on the highways. I don't even know what you're doing here." And he said, "What are you doing to my scale? You don't." And he's kept throwing pages at me from my permit book. And because I admit it, it was not in good shape. My IRP, which is your registration, was in one name. My bingo card, which is your permit for each and every state. We used to have a bingo card, and the reason why it's called bingo card is because it had a whole bunch of squares on it, 50, and then you had a sticker for every state, and then the sticker goes in the right spot on the bingo card, so that like if you're in Wyoming, he just looks at the bottom right hand corner right away. West Virginia, right down there. You see what I'm saying? And anyway, that was what. So he did not, in the middle of the piece of paper, find Montana, and my bingo card was in somebody else's name. I think it was in Marshall Bates' name, and then my RRP was in Brian somebody's name, which was a guy that worked for Marshall. It was kind of messy. So, and I don't even know what my fuel permit was in, but so anyway, he's just throwing pages at my face, and I don't even remember what all he said, but I know it wasn't nice. And then when he finally took a breath of air, I said, "So what's it going to take for me to get out of here?" He said, $20 trip permit. You need a trip permit, $20. I gave him my $20. I got my trip permit, and I was out of there. Picked up all my pages off the floor, and put them back in my book, and I left. And that's what it took to get by that guy. $20. That was we just looked at it as our tax to get through Montana. It was a $20 tax. But I had heard stories about Gerke. And truck drivers tell stories, and sometimes they can be pretty tall. And especially you get a couple of truck drivers who are trying to outdo each other on tall stories. And I heard some what I thought were tall stories about Gerke. And when all's said and done, and after I met the guy a couple of times, and my brother met the guy a couple of times, I started believing some of them stories. I heard somebody say once that some guy asked Gerke what it would take so he could get away with poking him in the face. Gerke said $100. Guy laid $100 on the table and hit him, knocked him off his stool. I never believed that story until after I met the guy, and then I kind of half wondered if it wasn't true. I'd heard his chicken coop got backed over by a trailer because some guy was mad at him. Some guy knifed him, but of course didn't reach no vitals. It just, you'd have to have a 24-inch knife in order to reach his vitals, and sword or something like that. Anyway, I just heard some crazy stories, but after I met the guy, I started to believe him. All right, so I got more bad stories, but let me tell you a good story. Well, I'll tell you, probably one of the nicest scales I ever been in, probably, I can think of a couple of nice ones, was in Willard Bay, Utah. Willard Bay, Utah. And it was this was about a year after this Gerke story. My brother and I was running from Seattle to Morgan, Utah, like 3 times a week, and doing a butthead with somebody coming out of Denver. Now, a butthead is when basically 2 trucks meet in the middle like that, swap trailers, and turn around and go the other way. And so anyway, so I had to go through that scale several times a week at Willard Bay. I'll tell you a little story. Well, they've just started, and this is sometime in the early 90s, they had just started doing random breathalyzer tests across the country for truck drivers. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. Drug testing is a good thing. All that's a good thing. We need professionals out here, and I'm just saying. So, anyway, I had never even stopped on the scale before. I mean, I'd always just rolled across, waved at the weighmaster, and away I went. And I wasn't even expecting it because I'd gone through so many times. We recognized each other. I never stopped at that scale. Never met those guys face to face. He turned on the red light, and I almost, like, I wasn't even prepared to stop. I was like, you know, it came to a stop, and I'm like, this is different. And I didn't know what was going on. Well, anyway, he axled me out, which usually is a precursor to getting an inspection. And so he blinked the red light at me, and so I came in with all my paperwork and everything. Goes, well, he says, you are the random recipient of a breathalyzer test. And I said, all right. I said, as long as that thing don't register coffee, we're good. And he laughed at me, and he goes, nope, it only registers alcohol. And I said, well, all I drink is coffee, so I think I ought to be good. So anyway, he goes and sets me up on a breathalyzer. Meanwhile, another driver that got stopped was over there talking about his constitutional rights, and he wasn't going to do it, and blah, 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 and he was going to sticking to his guns. Well, his DOT cop started putting on his overalls and grabbing his creeper, and that guy was going to get a full-blown inspection, and I guarantee you that guy was not going to make it out of that scale until he blew into that breathalyzer. But I was long gone before it ever came down to that, because they were going to inspect him and they were going to find something wrong with him, and because he was being difficult. And it's like, well, if you're not guilty, don't act guilty. And that guy was acting guilty. I'm just saying. So anyway, I blew my 000 and away I went. All right. Well, like I said, went through all the time. And, you know, because it's down by the big lake, the salty lake, and I get fog and all sorts of garbage down there. Well, anyway, I can remember one time I was driving through the fog, and I'm going slow, and I didn't even realize I blew past the scale until I saw it out my passenger window, and I'm like, I see the scale there, I'm like, oh no, I missed the scale, and it never closes, so I knew it was open, and I heard on the CB radio, guy hollered at me. He called me by my company name. He was like, hey, he goes, what are you doing blowing past my scale? And I said, believe it or not, I didn't see you in the fog. And he said, all right. He says, next time you come through here, which would have been, 2 days later, he says, you run over my scale twice then. I said, yes, sir. See you then. Anyway, so, I mean, usually it's a big deal if you run a scale. They'll come out there and get you. But the company I was with, we always ran light. Package vans that were, not heavy, and gross weight on 3 trailer axles and 3 tractor axles was somewhere in the neighborhood of 55 to 60,000 max pounds, and you got technically, if you're permitted for, you could go up to probably 85,000 or something with those 6 axles. So anyway, but he just let it slide. He was like, all right, come back. He knew I was probably light. I wasn't trying to get away with something. It was foggy, and he just said, when you come back, run over it twice. I didn't, actually. The next time, a couple days later, I ran over it only once, but he didn't make me go circle the block and do it again. But that's what it is out here on the road. We deal with good people, and we deal with bad people, and some of the good people are in cars, and some of the bad people are in cars. Sometimes there's a lot of people that don't surprise you, and then there's people that surprise you. And I mean by surprise means they do something nice, think ahead. And that's what being a professional is, thinking ahead, anticipating a situation before you get to it. Looking down the road 12 seconds or as far as you can possibly see down the road, that's what it is to be a professional. Aim high in your steering, getting the big picture, watching all around you, leave yourself an out, make sure they see you. You're always watching and keeping your eyes moving and trying to anticipate everything. That's what it is to be a professional. And you can do that when you're in your car too. Be a professional when you're driving in your car. So I just want you to know to take it easy, keep the shiny side up and the dirty side down, look on past your hood ornament, and don't be a bumper sticker, because that is not professional. And you have no time for planning on that situation when you're a bumper sticker. I'm just saying. So I'm Trucking Tanger Yeager. We gone.